Hey you guys, I'm so excited to interview Detroit filmmaker Joe Brown.
How y'all doing?
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
This guy is really amazing. So we actually met when we were working at the Amazon warehouse together. And there's a lot of crazies in the Amazon warehouse, but Joe and I hit it off because he makes feature-length films. And I went to his premiere of his latest film,
Set in Motion.
Yep. Yes.
It was available on Amazon Prime, Tubi TV, and YouTube Movies, by the way. So if you want to check that out.
Available on Amazon Prime, YouTube TV, and
Tubi.
That's awesome. That's incredible. Yeah, I have to say that I'm really, really impressed with Joe's artistic prowess and sophistication. It's really good. It's really good.
You. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah. It was heavily plot driven. There was really good character development. The camera angles were, on par with like industry standard cinematography. And in general, I just think that his use of like symbolism in his movies is absolutely on par with the vast majority of the stuff that's coming out of Hollywood. One thing that I really appreciated was what we were talking about earlier, how like your main character,
D'Angelo,
he had a book of poems, and he had so much like emotional baggage from having lost his father that he just poured into his poetry. And when he decided to let his demons go, he gave the book away.
Right.
It's one of those moments that was like very clean, very like symbolic, and just really artistically sophisticated. So thanks so much for being here.
Once again, thank you so much for having me. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Yes. So what are you working on now?
I'm currently working on a series right now. I'm still in the writing process, but it's a series called Archangel, and it is about a young man who's finding himself through the art of MMA, through the art of boxing and MMA. Mm-hmm. So right now, I just finished episode 4 of it. I'm currently working on episode 5, but I do, however, plan on filming the very first episode. It's going to be a rough copy, but I plan on filming the first episode of that, just the first episode, this fall. So be on the lookout for that. I'm probably going to drop it on YouTube, but my goal is to actually submit this to producers to try to get backing on it or to try to get grants on it.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah, because Archangel is going to take a lot of money to film this. So my goal is to film the first episode on my own and to send it out to different producers or different people to get grants to say, hey, this is my product. Here's the script for it. Here's the outline for it. Here's the episode. This is what I've done with no budget at all. Along with Set in Motion, this is what I've done with no budget, and imagine what I can do with a budget. So is it possible to get me out?
Yeah, that would be really, really amazing. Absolutely. Yeah. One thing that I do want to draw attention to is the way that you develop Set in Motion. Like your films are very high quality.
Thank you.
But even if they weren't high quality, being able to produce a feature-length film like that, being able to coordinate the actors and be a peacemaker and get a professional sound guy, a professional cinematographer, and actually direct that, like that is such a feat. Were most of the people in that cast from Detroit, like people who how did that?
Both Detroit and Ecorse. Ecorse, Michigan is a small city downriver. That's actually where the majority of my family is from. That's where my director of photography is from, the guy who shot my movie. Mm-hmm. So I can't do this without giving Ecorse its shout out, because, like I said, it's a very small city downriver, so it doesn't really get the attention that it deserves. Mm-hmm. But so yes, shout out to Ecorse. But yes, both Detroit and Ecorse. That's where the majority of my cast included.
So how did you elicit good acting from them? Like, what was the process of like finding people who could act and then like getting them into character?
Sure. So, believe it or not, majority of the cast were not actors.
Really?
Yeah. So the main three characters. So myself, Duke, the guy who played Marcus,
Mhm.
and Dwight, the guy who played Anthony.
Mhm.
And the beautiful Miss Kimberly Whitsett, the young lady who played the grandmother. We were the only ones who had acting experience prior to Set in Motion. So the way that I like to the way that I like to set my movies up, the way that I like to set my scripts up is I write the scripts out, I give them out to actors. The way I try to do, because I know most films, they just give the scripts out and then they just say, like, okay, today's film day, just have lines memorized, go. Since I came up doing plays,
Mhm.
I've always loved the rehearsal process of each play. So the table reads, the blocking, and I try to orchestrate that into my film. So I try to do some form of table reads whenever I can,
Mhm.
or some form of not necessarily rehearsing for blocking because we do that the same day that we film, but I try to get my actors to hear each other
Mhm.
in some way, shape, or form. So, and also it really helps me as a director to hear it. And the way that I do it is, and I do this with all of my films, whether it be short film skits or whatever. I'll have table reads and I'll say, okay, for this one, I want you to read it exactly how it is on the screen. Because I can hear how it sounds and I can hear if it sounds natural or not.
Mhm.
Because you run into different types of scripts and you run into different directors that say, I want it completely how it is on page. No shade to those directors at all.
Mhm.
But sometimes it can come across as scripted.
Right.
So what I do is I'll listen to it, and the scenes that do sound scripted, I will say to my actors, okay, question, how would you say this line? Like, how would you, in your everyday life, say this line? And that's how we take it from there, because I want to make each one of my films as natural as possible.
That's fascinating, yeah. So, a fun fact that I heard a while ago was the way that they used to train spies in World War II on how to tell lies is they would say, okay, stick as close to the way you naturally are as possible, and then just change, like the lie that you need to tell in order to, fulfill your mission or something.
Right.
And I think that scenario kind of parallels the way that you elicit natural emotion from your actors and incorporate them into the filmmaking process. Because you're like, hey, how would you say it with your words? What's natural for you?
Right.
How can you be part of this experience?
Right. And to go back to your original question, what I look for with my films, you don't have to be the best actor or the best actress in the world. You just have to be reliable.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who I can trust, someone who's loyal to my project, someone who reads this and wants the very best out of it, just like how I do.
Right.
And if you have that, I can work with you.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're not as great of an actor, I can still sit down with you.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what I have to do with a few actors in Set in Motion that had no acting experience whatsoever. They were loyal to me. Like, they were willing to sit down with me one-on-one, and I go over it and I say, okay, this is how it should be delivered, and we go back and forth until they get it right.
Right.
So that was the easiest part for me. Like I said, you don't necessarily have to be the best actor or actress. You just have to be loyal to me, or you have to want the best out of this project. And if I see your want for it, if I see your hunger for it, then that's how I know, like, I gotta.
Right, yeah.
And even Duke was that way, because we worked on a film before Set in Motion called Object of Affection. Oh God, that movie was so cringe. But prior to that, he had no acting experience, but he had an aura about him that just drew people to him. And he was just he's an artist in his form, like in his human form. So it's easy to work with people like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that one of the most important things for you is buy-in to your project.
Right.
You like share the same vision.
Right.
And
That's exactly what I was looking for. Yes, I couldn't come up with the word. Yes, but you were spot on. You said that. Yes.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. And it sounds like you're willing to put in the work and like be patient with someone until they really understand what your vision. So how do you come up with an artistic vision? Like what's the process of like, do you have the movie in your head beforehand, or what goes on when you're trying to tell a story like that?
Good question. So the way that I come up with different movies or ideas for movies is either I have a dream about it. That's
Classic.
not even gonna lie. Either I have a dream about it. B, I go through it myself, or that's the easiest part is if I go through it because I can just write it down.
Right.
Or someone who I know goes through it, and I'm like, okay. Or that was the easiest way, the funnest way to create for me is to hang around creative people. So a lot of my friends are artists, even if they don't know it.
Right.
Like a lot of my friends are artists, are comedians, are not like comedians as if on stage, but they're just naturally funny.
Yeah.
Or they just deliver something, and I'm like, I'm gonna put that line, I'm gonna steal that line from you, I'm gonna put that in the film.
Right.
And so yeah, that's basically how I come up with it, or I come up with it by accident. So Set in Motion was by accident because Set in Motion I originally, by accident isn't the best word, but for lack of better words, came up by accident. But Set in Motion, it was supposed to be about, when I initially wrote it was supposed to be about two foster brothers.
Okay.
So one foster brother was kind of like how D'Angelo is, like exactly spot on.
Wait, can you tell them how D'Angelo is? D'Angelo's the poet.
Okay, so yes, in Set in Motion, D'Angelo is a 16-year-old high school student who suffers with post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and depression. At the very beginning of the movie, spoiler alert, but it happens the first 3 minutes of the movie, so it's not too much to spoil. But he loses his father, and I'm not going to say how he loses his father, but as a child, he blames himself for the death of his father, and he brings that hurt with him throughout the movie. And not only does he blame himself, but his mother also blames himself. So his mother neglects him daily throughout the movie. So he doesn't really have anybody to go to except for his older cousin and his grandmother. But he feels like such a burden that he stays to himself. And the only way that he can release his demons is through the poetry that he writes. So basically, D'Angelo was a standalone character. I always wanted to make a movie like D'Angelo because I've also experienced it. Not necessarily the post-traumatic stress disorder part, but the anxiety, the depression, growing up being bullied and stuff like that. I always wanted to make a character like that. So he was a standalone. Character, and Marcus and Anthony were combined into another foster brother.
Oh, okay.
So, that foster brother, he was pretty much on his own. He was star athlete, but he got into the drug game and stuff like that. But at the end of that movie, the bully that Marcus beats up in Set in Motion comes back, and he actually kills D'Angelo.
Oh. Okay.
But my friend said, "What type of message do you want to send? Do you want it to send like, okay, the academic student is like looked as less than the athletic student?"
Right.
So I'm like, hate that you write about this. Like, I hate that you write. Because I'm like, this is the movie that I was going to make. But then I thought about it, and I'm like, yeah, you got a point. And the rest is history. So I broke the characters up. And
so how did you fix that message? What's the driving message of Set in Motion as it is now?
Oh, it's so many driving messages.
There are.
How much time we got? So, trying to narrow it down to quite a few. Think before you act. Because every action has an equal but opposite reaction, and you see that in the movie. There's always a way out, even when it doesn't seem like there is. Oh man,
I can tell you.
Yes, go ahead, please,
dude. One of the lines that stuck with me for like, I think it's been a year since I watched the premiere of his movie, and I still remember the line where like he's super upset and he doesn't really know himself, and he's talking to his grandmother about things that are happening inside of him, and she says, God saves his hardest battles for his toughest soldiers.
Yeah,
and it was such a good line. Did anyone ever tell you that before?
Yes, actually.
Okay.
Yes.
How's it that?
My grandmother actually told me that.
Really?
Yeah, I was going. No, I think it was my mother that told me, because my mother is a huge God-fearing woman, and it was probably one of the darkest moments of my life. I'm going to say that quite a bit throughout this interview, because I had a bunch of dark moments coming up, and that's actually where Archangel came from. But we'll get into that. But yeah, I asked her, she said, yeah, God gives his hardest battles to his toughest soldiers. So you obviously, if you're going through this, then that means that you're a lot stronger than you give yourself credit for.
Right.
And it took me years to believe that. Because I thought that it was just one of those things that she would say to make me feel better. But it wasn't until the more that I've matured and the more I've grown up into becoming the young man that I am, that I realized it's one of my I can't think of the word, but it's basically one of my motivations to keep it going.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it sounds like the type of advice that my grandma would give me.
Right.
Because I really didn't grow up in a religious house at all. Like, no one really cared. Like, the idea of God was not present except for my one Arab grandmother who still did believe in God. And I think that there's a lot of value in that message, not only because of the message itself, but also because it provides, well, I don't know, I don't have a fully formed thought on that, but I think that the idea that like your self can be refined through darkness gives people, or has given people, a tremendous amount of strength to get through things that are way more terrible than anything I've been through. So it's just that was a really, really good line, well put. So the ending of the movie, tell me a little bit about how you fixed the idea that you were prioritizing sports over academics. Like, how did you rearrange that story so that all three characters kind of seemed equal in value?
Good question. They say that. Obviously, in today's time, and for the longest, sports has been looked at as higher than academics in a way, and you see it a lot in movies and shows as well. But I didn't want that to be. Some sort of like a cliche in mind.
Right.
So, and I didn't think about it until it was brought to my attention. So that just goes to show. And the way that I fixed it was to actually show the dangers in not necessarily like the academic game, but the drug life. So yeah, that's why I wanted to make it. That's why I made them into split characters as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I wanted to focus solely on not necessarily academic, but art, and that's what I really wanted to base the movie off of.
Yeah,
and that's why D'Angelo's story was the not necessarily the number one story, but that's why I put so much emphasis on his story as opposed to the other two characters.
Right. He's the protagonist, and he's also the one that goes through the critical change. You know,
right?
Like he's the one that grows as a person.
Right.
So absolutely. There's also the fact that his poetry teacher was really helpful. Like
absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I did that for a reason because I also wanted to show that D'Angelo had a corner whether he realized it or not. Mm-hmm. Like he had people who wanted him to win. Mm-hmm. And that's why I put, oh man, that's one of my favorite, if not my favorite scenes when Dr. James says, when you hurt, we hurt. Mm-hmm. But when you're healed, we're healed. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the main reasons why I did the ending the way that I did, was to show D'Angelo not necessarily healed, but he's walking into the journey of becoming healed. Right. And that's something that I wanted people to take away from me. Like throughout the entire movie, we've seen him hurt. Mm-hmm. Through 95% of the movie is D'Angelo hurt. Right. And when we see that ending, when he's finally not necessarily healed all the way, but he's no longer hurt. Mm-hmm. Is, in my opinion, the biggest payoff of it. Yeah, it absolutely is. And I remember that scene not only because it was such an encouraging scene, and it was sad. It was like really, really heart-wrenching, but ultimately encouraging. I also remember that in the cinematography, like it was like a white wall with like white lights on it, and then D'Angelo, was he wearing black or he was wearing dark colors, right? Which scene? The scene where Dr. James is in the hallway with him and he's saying, he's wearing a button-up white shirt with black pants and a black tie. Black pants and black tie. No, bow tie. I'm sorry. A bow tie. Okay, yeah. That's what it is. Yeah. Well, I thought that it was cool that you decided to like put it in a white hallway because it's kind of like, I know that it's not like it actually like entering heaven, but it's one of those scenes where it's like if you're in a white setting, the reader is kind of like seeing the overtones of like the idea that this is a moment where he's trying to get healed, and I feel like that move to like dress a character a certain way or to put a scene like that in that type of background is definitely characteristic of movie making that has a strong sense of symbolism and like pathetic fallacy and all of those things, like really artistic and literary, whatever they're called, literary. They're not tropes. They're like. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Right? It's like a thing that you do in books, right? Like it's raining, the person is sad, that type of thing. It was really good. Thank you. Yeah. That was not on purpose. But thank you. Yeah. I never thought of it like that. So you're opening up my eyes to something new. Mm-hmm. But yeah. Maybe it was just natural for you to put it in there. It was just natural for you to put the set in there. You're like, yeah that looks right. You had like that intuition that was the right scene. Yeah. That's super cool. Thank you. So tell me a little bit about Archangel. Now, you introduced at the beginning, but expand upon it. Okay. Well, how dark do you want me to get? Dark. Okay. As dark as you're comfortable with. Okay, so Archangel, I developed Archangel in my mind when I was about 10 or 11. Mm-hmm. And he would come into my life periodically. Mm-hmm. But when I came up with him as a child, he was like a superhero. Mm-hmm. And he was like a superhero type of throwaway. Mm-hmm. But Archangel, I didn't develop the actual Archangel character until my freshman and sophomore year of high school. And eighth through 10th grade was the hardest, like one of the darkest moments for me.
Yeah.
Because that was when I was getting heavily bullied. And even though I kept my grades up, I missed half the year of the school because I just didn't want to go because the way that people made me feel.
Right.
So I would like make myself sick just to not go. And by doing that, like I would like snort pepper to make myself sneeze. I would try to make myself throw up. And I was a good enough actor at that point to the point where my parents believed me.
Right.
But yeah, I missed so many days of school. And
by the way, sorry to interrupt. I have a story about me faking a sickness in my story screens in the ego, and anyway. Go on.
no, that's a real thing. It is a real thing. And when I was getting bullied, that was when I was getting bullied the most. So that's when everybody had their superheroes in their mind, whether it be Superman, Batman, Spider-Man. My superhero was Archangel. He was just this bad. Can I cuss?
Yeah.
He was just like this badass character, like this badass fighter.
Right.
And that's all I wanted to be because I wanted to be a fighter because I wanted to fight my bullies off. But so I just imagined myself as this badass character.
Right.
And I would say that Archangel is an attribute to actually saving my life because when I got home, just me daydreaming about this character was enough to keep me going. So the actual series itself is season 1 is about Gabriel. That's my character's name in Archangel. It's Gabriel coming into finding himself because Gabriel has anger issues, but he doesn't see him as anger issues. It's basically in the very first episode, he takes a young lady out on a date who's a martial artist that he doesn't know. He doesn't know that she's a martial artist until they get mugged and she bites them off.
Right.
So he feels emasculated because he's like, I couldn't protect you.
Right.
So he tries to any way that his manhood is brought into question, he resorts to violence to not because he's angry, but to prove to himself that he's more of a man. Like I can fight, so therefore, like I'm a man.
Right.
And it's not until he finds his boxing trainer and his boxing coach and his MMA coach shows him the difference between using fighting as a form of violence versus using fighting as a form of art. And when he realizes, when he transitions from the violence aspect to the art aspect, he finds more of himself and he finds more of his confidence. And because that's where I initially found a lot of my confidence through boxing and more recently through jiu-jitsu. So I wanted to show like the difference between using it as a form of violence versus using it as a form of art. He becomes an MMA fighter. Well, through later seasons, he becomes that badass MMA fighter that I had in my mind ever since I was a child. So yeah,
that's fascinating. There's a lot of issues that I want to touch on in that. The first is that you came up with your own superhero, which is really characteristic of artists. A lot of people, their superhero is someone who they're told about, but you came up with your own. So what attributes of Gabriel are distinct to you and your hero?
Oh, great question. So, well, believe it or not, when I wrote the first draft of Archangels, I'm on my third or fourth draft. I realized that Gabriel was seemed too similar to D'Angelo, and D'Angelo was more of who I am. So I had to drift away from that character in order to make Gabriel his own character. So, thus making Gabriel his own character, I had to take away from myself, and I had to make him his own standalone.
Okay.
So his attributes are different from mine, but I would say that his comedic timing and the way that he says things would be similar to mine in the sense of if you say a rib or me, then my comedic timing to roast you back is like, you know.
Right.
But as far as everything else, he's more so stubborn, and he's more so like, I don't have anger issues. You know, if somebody pushes me to that limit, like I want to fight back. Like everybody gets into fights. Like I don't know why, like everybody else gets into fights and they're good, but the minute I get into a fight, I have anger issues.
Right.
You know, so he's more so in denial than I would be. Whereas, like if somebody tells me something, like I'll evaluate it and I'll, you know, and if I agree with it, cool.
Right.
And if not, then I'll try to have you dig deeper into why you feel that way.
Right, yeah.
Whereas Gabriel is like, you're wrong.
Yeah,
like
I'm not having that.
Yeah. So I went that route because I did a bunch of table reads for that, and people were more interested in Lawrence. Lawrence is the anti-hero of Archangel. I was going to make him the antagonist, but I feel like he's more of an anti-hero given his background. But people were more interested in his story than Gabriel's story. And at the end of the day, it's Gabriel's story.
Right.
So I had to, and I realized the reason why is because people felt too sorry for Gabriel to the point where they're like, okay, this guy's like another you or like another D'Angelo.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, I gotta make him his own character. Like he can't be D'Angelo 2.0. Like I have to make him his own character. So to answer your question, he's not as similar to me, but what I'm trying to drive in is the difference between Gabriel and Archangel. Whereas Archangel is kind of like Clark Kent and Superman,
right,
or Steve Rogers and Captain America.
Okay.
Like their alter egos are not the same as their human versions.
right.
Even though Gabriel is Archangel, it's kind of, I mean, even though Gabriel and Archangel are both human,
Right.
when he puts on, like when he laces up and when he's getting ready to fight, like you see it's a different aura, kind of like how people would say like how Mike Tyson was whenever they were at the back with him before a fight, like he'd be fine, but 30 minutes before the fight, like when he starts warming up, they say that the vibe changes. That's kind of like how I want Gabriel and Archangel to be.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Yeah, so a lot of superhero stories are intensely masculine stories about boys becoming men. You know, like that's kind of a big thing. Like Superman is kind of like the embodiment of like America winning World War II. Or that's like generally the way that like people talk about and think about that plot line. There's also like a Hulk, which is like, oh, this person he can't control his anger. Like this is what happens when you can't control your anger. Or, like a lot of high fantasy novels have this, like this man is exploring his own strength, or he's in some way becoming a man. And from what you've told me about Archangel, it's actually a tad more emotionally sophisticated because his exploring his strength isn't like, it's good because he's, being an MMA fighter and like discovering himself, but it's also like pulling him back a little bit. Would you say that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. So what? So in terms of like his emotional profile and the way that you built up that character after you realized that sometimes people felt sorry for him, like what like characteristics did you add after you made that change? Or I guess you already answered that, but
the number one thing is confidence.
Confidence.
Yes. Yes, the number one thing is confidence. Another thing is he's uh, he's more low key with his with him feeling emasculated.
Right.
So so the very first copy was the very first rough draft that I wrote of Archangel was right after Lisa, his love interest. Right after Lisa fends for himself, he goes right to his roommates and tells them everything that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in this version, he keeps it all to himself. He keeps his emotions bottled up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not until his friends take him to a bar where he signs himself up to fight a professional fighter and he gets beat up really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And he's daydreaming, kind of like how I'm daydreaming, oh, that's another characteristic. Okay, I'm glad that I brought that up. So another characteristic that I put into Gabriel
Mm-hmm.
is that when he daydreams, he's no longer in reality,
Mm-hmm.
in his mind.
Right.
So in his mind, he's in his daydream.
Right.
Whereas to the naked eye, so like
Yeah.
in his mind, like I could be like fighting someone, right?
Yeah.
But to the naked eye, it just looks like I'm going like this.
Right.
And people catches him in that, and he has to snap himself out of it
Right.
and realize that people are watching him. So
That's something that I deal with personally. I absolutely, I'll get into my own head and then I'll like forget that I'm like, yeah, you do that a little bit?
I do it all the time.
Dude, me too.
All the time.
Yeah. I think that it's just characteristic of creators. Because, like, no offense, but like our thoughts are more interesting than whatever's going on.
It is.
Yeah.
Like, oh my, like, and I can't, if I had $1 for every time my cousin Trey or my father caught me,
Yeah.
I would have enough money to fund Archangel my own damn self. Because it's a story that I was walking to work
Yeah.
like 6-7 years ago. My dad, he normally like watches me out the window like as I'm going to my car,
Yeah.
and I was just in a scene in my head that a person was swinging on me, and I was dodging it to swing back, and and I actually did the dodge. And to this day, my dad brings it up like oh Lord, my son's fucked up in the head. It's fucked up in the head. So yeah, that's what D'Angelo does.
Mm-hmm.
So D'Angelo envisions himself beating up the guys and saying like, yes, I'm your protector. Because I beat these guys up. And he goes into detail of how he, like one scene, the mugger shoots him in the heart and he pulls the bullet out, flicks it at him and said, nobody can stop a heart as pure as mine. And then he goes and he beats him up. But he's doing this in class. And the professor stops the class, like everybody is looking at him.
Yeah, and he's like, oh.
Yeah, so when he fights the MMA fighter and he gets beat up, and like his roommates are like, bro, what is going on with you? Like these last two weeks, like you gotta tell us something now because you've been acting different.
Right.
And they kind of like force it out of him, like, okay, this is what happens.
Right.
So he's more confident within himself at the very beginning because he gets Lisa, and Lisa did not like him, and he charmed his way into getting a date with her.
Right.
So yes, he's more confident. He's more low key. I put more. He's no longer a stock character. So like I added more depth within him. So.
I mean, none of your characters are really stock characters. I think that every single character I've seen or read, with the exception of comedy skits, like you don't need depth to have a comedy skit. But like, definitely, I think that D'Angelo, first of all, it's pretty emotionally intuitive that like he blamed his father for his death. We're talking about the previous story. I'm tracking the depth of Joe's characters. And I think that all of them have at least like 3 characteristics. Like I'm pretty sure that it was William Faulkner who said that if I don't know what my character eats for breakfast, then I have to take him out of the story because he would spend like so much time thinking about his characters and developing them. If it wasn't William Faulkner, it was someone else like William Faulkner. I think that you definitely spend a lot of time with your characters making sure that they are people, they have to feel like people, and that's something that I pride myself on. I definitely have spent hours and hours and hours with every single character that I write about, just thinking about them. You actually read one of the stories in my book.
I did.
Yeah, you did. You read it when I first wrote it. Like
Right.
I was in the process of writing it.
Loved it. Yeah. The one with Ilsa.
Yeah. The one with Ilsa. You remember it.
Yeah.
He remembers the story. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did you did you notice or feel that there was like emotional depth in that story? Or
Oh, absolutely.
It was.
Absolutely. Between the brother and sister, it was so long ago. So Ilsa was the only name that I do remember.
Yeah, he read it 2 years ago when we were working in the Amazon warehouse together, and he still remembers the characters. So that's a big win.
Yeah, I definitely remember between the bond between the brother and the sister, and the bond between the sister and the abusive boyfriend.
Right.
So, but I love a good brother and sister dynamic story. Like I love that type of story because it kind of reminds me of this anime that I'm watching called Demon Slayer.
Okay, cool.
And the main character's sole purpose is to protect his little sister, who's a demon, and try to convert her back to being a human.
Oh wow.
So yeah, it's something about the protective older brother that would do anything possible for his sister while still having his own issues, like dealing with his Arabic background and stuff and his past. Like, so yeah, I definitely understand the depth of it.
Thank you.
And to be perfectly honest with you, that's how writing is so. Writing is very hard for me, but that's why it's so easy for me to make my writing flow, because I focus more on the character than the plot.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Your plot is character driven. It's just so natural, because once you really know who this person is, you know what they're going to do.
Right.
Like, oh, I know who this person is. I'm going to put them in this scene. This is how they're naturally going to react. The character driven plot is just like it flows like knowing a person.
It's one thing that my acting and screenwriting mentor, shout out Dennis North, one thing that Dr. North always told me was if you put your all into a character, it will tell the story for you. And he's absolutely right. Once again, shout out Dennis North, because that's how I write a lot of my stuff. I let my characters write it for me.
Right.
I just type it out, and my characters just, because the dynamic of Gabriel and his roommates are the dynamic of myself and my best friends.
Right.
Even though they're not 100% us, they're characteristics of stuff that that I'm going through.
Absolutely.
And yeah, my characters tell the story for me. Set in Motion, D'Angelo, Marcus, and Anthony, they told the story for me. As long as I did the work into making their character arcs, then they will tell the story for me.
Yeah, they will. They absolutely will. That's why I said at the beginning that your movies were character driven, extremely developed. Absolutely. Also, one thing that I want to touch on is how your characters are kind of like people you know, but not really. That's absolutely true for my writing. Also, all of my writing is somehow inspired by an emotional complex that I've observed or felt or seen, and the purpose of taking that emotion away from a person and then just talking about it in terms of a character is it has this mimetic value where you can see yourself in your character and you understand yourself better. Yeah, and that's something I definitely see in your work. You can plot yourself onto a character, and then by going through the story, you learn something about yourself at the end of the movie.
That's one thing that I loved about Set in Motion and everybody watching. I feel like the vast majority of people can relate to at least one character in Set in Motion.
Yeah.
And
I related to D'Angelo.
Yeah, a lot of people did.
Yeah.
A lot of people did, especially with going through mental health illnesses, like going through depression or going through anxiety or PTSD. A lot of people really related. A lot of people came up to me and they opened up to me The people who I thought were the most confident people that I've ever met opened up to me like, "You're this movie spoke to me, like this character spoke to me because I too dealt with that and still dealing with it." Blew my mind.
That's wonderful.
Blew my mind because, like I said, on the outside, they're the most confident individuals that I know.
Right.
And when they told me that, I'm like, wow, I didn't even realize that a lot of people who are no longer in the drug game related to Marcus's character. A lot of athletes related to Anthony's character that felt like they were being overpushed and they were loved by their talent as more so than their like themselves. You know, so yeah, that's one of the main things that I love, and I love that. I didn't tell you this, but Set in Motion is now in there's a teacher in a middle school teacher in New York who actually added Set in Motion to their curriculum, and they're making like,
yay!
Yeah,
That's awesome.
She sent me a photo of her students watching them, and I did a Zoom meeting like for their career day. They asked me a bunch of questions and stuff. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, I love that. That's one of the main things that I loved. And another thing that happened 2 weeks ago, I went to a Family Dollar, and a kid came up to me and he said, "Are you the guy from Set in Motion, the poet?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then he ran, he got his friends, and he said, "That's the guy." I'm like, "Oh my God, he's so cool." I'm like, "Oh, like,
wow,
that's so rewarding."
Yeah,
you know?
that is so rewarding. That's amazing. So how did he watch the movie? He got it, or
his uncle was the basketball coach in the movie. So he said, "Yeah, my uncle was in the movie. Like, are you the poet?" And I said, "Yeah."
Yeah.
And then he said, "Oh my gosh!" Like, I said, I gave him a 5, and he said he gave me a 5. Like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And I'm like, just an everyday person.
Yeah.
But I didn't say that. But I'm like, wow.
That's amazing. No, that really, like, the thing about it is that you have had such an immediate impact on the people in your community by creating this movie. Like, it's not just the fact the movie is good, but again, I'm drawing attention to the fact that you were able to coordinate an entire set of humans who like maybe like they're humans who like have jobs, they have lives, whatever, that they got to do things, and you were able to make a feature-length film from the beginning to the end. I would never even attempt to do that because I don't think that I would have the like people skills to like be patient with all those people. And that's really, writing is kind of my field because I kind of go inside myself when I'm telling stories. I don't really want to like coordinate that with other people, but you've involved an entire community to do this, and in that way, like, you've kind of like uplifted and given like an entire group of people a common purpose. And that's insane.
Well, first and foremost, it's by the grace of God that I did that. Because looking back on it, I don't even know how I got it done. So it's by the grace of God that I did. But as far as the patience goes, you gotta think I came from nothing. Like, when I made Set in Motion, I didn't have a dime in my name, so I wasn't able to pay these actors. So, the way that I look at it, they're donating their time to me. So the least I can do is be as patient with them as possible. Because at the end of the day, they didn't have to do that.
Right.
Like, they didn't have to be in my movie. They didn't have to donate their time to sit down with me and try to get these lines correct. Right. So that's the number one way that I look at it. Like, if they're doing this to me, then I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that they sell it the way that I'm going to make sure I do whatever I can to help them. Right. With. And patience. I definitely, don't get me wrong. Patience. Yeah, I don't like to say that I have a great deal of patience, but even during Set in Motion, there were times where I had to scream in the pillow. Right. Like, there were times where I got so frustrated. And I had my sister, who plays my mother in Set in Motion, I had my sister had to calm me down and say, "Woosah," like everything's going to be okay.
Right, yeah. I remember you telling me about that. The fact that you were able to do that is just absolutely mind-boggling. Super cool. So to wrap up the interview, I want to ask.
We're wrapping it up.
I want to ask about you. We can go as long as I feel like we covered your artistic, whatever it is. I feel like we covered what you've been doing, but I want to ask a little bit about how you developed and became the person who you are today.
Humble beginnings. Like I said, I hate those dark moments that I went through, but at the same time, I'm glad because I came out a lot stronger because of those, and I came out a lot more mentally creative, and it gave me the outlook, or it gave me, like I said, like how D'Angelo did, it gave me an outlook to release my demons. So. So because of that, I think that I am a better person because of what happened. Now, granted, I still have those dark days. I still have.
Well, every artist does.
Yeah, I still have like those times when I look back and I'm like, am I really over this? Or I do have those days where I'm like, could I have done more? Like I'm at the end of the day, I'm still human. So. Humble beginnings is what I would say. I have to think about the question again.
No, it's okay. That makes total sense. Like I think that you kind of touched on the question when you were talking about that 8th grade to 10th grade experience where you started, developing the character Archangel in your head. I too have a creative process of disassociating from myself and telling myself stories about how I wish that it happened, or trying to get the story about what could have happened, or what did happen and why did it happen, which is really how I've gotten into my best writing, where I produce really really meaningful characters that are dripping with personality and politics, and they kind of open you up to your center. One of the things that I think drives almost all really good artists is the ability to spend an inordinate amount of time inside yourself. And the thing is that when you spend time inside of yourself, I talk about this in my book. I ask, it's a very short essay about why Ernest Hemingway and Sylvia Plath and a bunch of other writers killed themselves. And it starts out really dark, but the thing that I talk about is how as you go deeper and deeper inside of yourself, you just verge upon this your own creative power, and in verging upon your own creative power, you realize that there is a limit to it and that you are small, and as you let the creative tickle turn into a burn, it kind of drives you towards depression. I don't know how to describe it any other way.
Makes sense.
It's something that a lot of writers go through. So just the process of pulling yourself out of that. A lot of people have given themselves to their own creativity and allowed themselves to drown in the books that they read shortly before they actually whatever. So so I don't remember how I started talking about this. Remind me of what you had said before I started talking about beauty is not for mortals. Remind me of what you said.
Humble beginnings.
I don't know how I got there. There was a connecting point. It was the 8th grade to 10th grade moments. Yeah. So I think that that's the point. The point is that there was that pathology of escapism, and then there was also the fact that you really had to understand your own emotions, and that allowed you to develop characters that were really vibrant and vivacious. Your characters feel like people. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
So now you are on track to making Archangel. Are you still working at the Amazon warehouse?
I am.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Can you remind me what is the person who's above the people in the orange vests? What are they called?
PAs.
Thank you. Okay.
PAs, AMs, OMs.
OMs, all that. Okay, cool. Yeah, I was looking for the word for that the other day. But yeah, I think that it's so amazing that you have produced these feature-length films, that you are producing such high-quality art, really with no budget. And I absolutely hope that producers discover and recognize the quality of your work.
Thank you. I hope so too.
Yeah, I hope so too. Yeah, I definitely recognized it from the moment that we started talking, and from also the moment that I saw the show, and I was like, yeah, that's solidly like. At least 75% of the movies in Hollywood are lower in artistic development than this film that was made with a budget of like however much you were able to crowdfund from your community.
Basically, the way that I came up, basically, I just did a bunch of odd jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Like you know what's crazy? I was working units like as a side job, and I would.
What?
Working units, so I would glaze, I would paint, I would take out trash and sweep up and stuff like that. And I remember I had to take out a broken down toilet.
Nice.
This was in the dead of winter too.
Oh
gosh. So I'm taking this toilet down from the unit, and I take it to the dumpster. Mm-hmm. And as I was about to like dump it, just a whole pile of shit just came from the bottom of it and got on my good hoodie. Now, it wasn't like the hoodie wasn't an everyday hoodie. It was like a working hoodie, like the type of hoodie that you would clean up in, like paint and stuff like that. But it was like my good working hoodie. So I had to take that off because the smell was it smelled like it was rotten inside that toilet for some years. So I almost threw up. That's how bad it was. So I had to take that hoodie off in the dead of winter, toss it. And
you're like, I'm going shirtless. I don't care. Yeah, you're like, this is what I'm doing for my art. I hope that God sees that this is what I'm doing.
After that, I literally said, set in motion, better put us fucking better. I got to deal with this. But you got to do what you got to do to make your dream a reality. Yeah. I'm still.
And it's admirable that, I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good. I'm still, like I said, I'm nowhere near where I want to be yet, but I know that I'm a step forward from where I came.
Definitely.
So yeah, I still have to scratch and claw for $1, to put to fund these things. But at the end of the day, I know that I'm working for something much greater. Mm-hmm. Even though I don't have it right now, like I know that I will. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's just really amazing. Joe, thank you so much for coming on this interview.
Thank you so much for having me. Like seriously, this is an honor.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm glad. And I hope that everyone who watches it will go and check out Joe's movies. Remind them again where they can find them.
You can find Set in Motion on Amazon Prime, Tubi TV, or YouTube Movies. And Archangel is not up yet, but more than likely it will be on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is called The Wonderful World of Joe. Mm-hmm. And that's where I post skits, and that's also where you will find the Archangel prelim, where my love interest fights off the two dudes. It's called Archangel Preliminary Episode 1, mm-hmm. and that's on my YouTube channel. Once again, The Wonderful World of Joe. And yeah, please check those out.
Check it out. Okay. Awesome. We spoke for an hour.